Hello subscribers and other viewers. This is a video I've been meaning to make for a long time, but I've been busy with, let's just say, very important college stuff, and so I haven't been able to get around to it for a little while. Also, because I'm at college taking a summer class right now and doing research, I forgot my microphone at home, so I'm basically recording this on a potato that is the microphone for my laptop. But the point of this video is just to discuss Metal Gear Solid 5 and whether it works. Now, what I mean by does it work is, first off, does it work as a good game? And then, does it work as a Metal Gear Solid game? And these are two very different questions, because as anyone who's played Metal Gear Solid knows, it's a unique series of games, and it's got such unique gameplay and it's so plot focused that you could be a good game but not fit into the Metal Gear Solid series. The game has been plagued by a fair amount of controversy, from it being open world, which is totally new to the main games in the Metal Gear series, to all of the controversies and problems at Konami, to the fact that the series clearly was intended to end with Metal Gear Solid 4, and so it's kind of continuing the series that ended. So first off, as a game, it basically works. I mean, it wouldn't be a 10 out of 10 game in my opinion, but just viewed as another video game if you came into it with no expectations, if you just picked it up off the shelf and you're like, oh, what's this Metal Gear thing? Let me try it out. It does work. I mean, it still has the core elements of Metal Gear Solid, especially in terms of gameplay. I mean, the CQC is still unique, although I'm not really happy with the direction they took CQC in this game. But it is still a very unique gameplay feature, even if it's a little dumbed down. And there's still just something thrilling about the stealth aspect to the Metal Gear series. I mean, there's no other game series that really does stealth the way Metal Gear does, and the stealth is still intact. You're still going to be hiding bodies in containers and stuff like that. You're still going to be tranking your opponents from far away. You're still going to be sneaking up on them to grab them and choke them. All of that is still there, and so at its core, it is a Metal Gear Solid game. And that gameplay is unique and fun, and it also definitely works, much like Metal Gear Solid 4 did, as an action game too. Like, honestly, if you wanted to avoid stealth, you mostly could. You would just have to be very strategic about how you launch an attack. And personally, although some purists for the series might disagree with me, I like that you can play it both ways pretty much seriously. It's still epic when you have a chance to take down an entire camp of enemy soldiers using completely stealth. Like, it is so epic when I realize that I'm out of ammo. I got into a firefight, I've launched all my rockets, I'm out of items, I've shot all my grenades, I'm out of ammo for my assault rifle, and all I've got left are either my bare hands or maybe I have a couple tranquilizer shots. And there's a camp of enemies between me and where my helicopter will land, and I have got to take them out. Or there's a side mission along the way that I just want to complete. And so calling upon my, approximately a decade's worth of experience, almost now, playing Metal Gear Solid games, I sneak in there, I do some CQC, sneak up on some people, choke them, and take out the entire camp successfully without being spotted. It's still such a thrill. It's still such a fun type of unique gameplay that you're not going to get anywhere else. And so that's still really cool. And the open world aspect of the game, it works all right. I mean, it doesn't feel ideal, but it works better than a lot of open world games do. It just isn't the type of gameplay that lends itself to being open world the way like Grand Theft Auto would, but it still works pretty well. The plot is workable. The plot is definitely very flawed. It's an okay plot. Like, it makes you think about certain things in a fairly deep way, and you know who all the characters are. You don't get a great attachment to them, and there's a twist at the end that I'm not going to spoil here, but the twist really lost me. I hated the twist. If you look it up online, I mean, obviously you'll get spoilers, but you'll see that the twist, some people seem to think like it's okay, and then there are people like me who absolutely hate it. There don't seem to be that many people who really like the twist, so I'm going to count that as a flaw in the plot and not just personal taste. So the plot is workable, the gameplay is pretty good, Although with the gameplay, you do have a problem with the side missions, because the side missions are actually a pretty major part of the game, and in fact, some of them are actually not really side missions, they're actually required. And they get really, really repetitive really quickly. I mean, they send you back to the same locations, they are the same task. I mean, there have been so many times when I've had to take out an enemy camp and just extract one soldier. I have done that probably 20 times, and it gets real old real quick. So, there are definitely some flaws in the gameplay too, but it's overall a good game. I'm not going to give it a score here, but it's a good game that would be worth buying. So now that we've established that it more or less works as a game, although not an incredible game, let's talk about how it fits into the Metal Gear Solid series, and whether it really works as a Metal Gear game. So the biggest problem is that the plot falls really, really short. In fact, a lot of people online report that the plot was actually unfinished, which if you know Metal Gear games, that is the single worst thing you could do. I mean, the gameplay is really unique, as I've mentioned, but the plot is why people love Metal Gear Solid. People love the characters. People love the, at times crazy, at times humorous, at times extremely mature and complex plots that the entire Metal Gear series is known for. And they messed it up. As I said before, it's a workable plot. It's not terrible, but it's nowhere near the rest of the Metal Gear Solid games. I mean, if the rest of the plots from Metal Gear Solid games are like 10 out of 10, this is like a 6, maybe a 7. And honestly, again, I'm trying not to do spoilers here, but there's a major subplot to the game that is literally unfinished. And the problem is, it's not like it's one of those intentionally open-ended games where the plot doesn't really wrap up, but it's not supposed to. It's supposed to leave you wondering. It's not really like that, though. Like, I would be totally open to a game ending that way. It's fine. Like, I didn't mind even a cliffhanger ending at the end of, like, Assassin's Creed 1, for example. I was fine with it. But the problem is it's not executed well here, and honestly, I don't think it was intended to be an open-ended or cliffhanger ending, because I don't think there's really supposed to be a sequel to it. And obviously Kojima won't be involved in it, so he didn't plan a sequel. The gameplay as an open-world game does not completely work, and that honestly is probably the part where Kojima himself is most likely to blame. In my opinion, the series works better as a fairly linear series. The gameplay can work in the open world, but the games are so incredibly story-driven that you need to have a certain order to tell a deep story, because every part builds on the last part. If you're telling a complex plot, it doesn't really work if you start telling an incredibly complicated story, then take a break for it for 5 hours to do a bunch of side plots, and then come back to the complex story. Not to mention, you can't build suspense in the same way, because if some urgent event is happening, you need the character to be going on to that next. Even to a degree with the logic and the atmosphere behind the gameplay, as in the infiltration aspect itself, it makes sense to have that be a linear plot, where you're infiltrating a base, or an enemy camp, or Shadow Moses, something like that. It doesn't really work as well if you can just botch the infiltration and leave the entire place. Just from the point of view of the gameplay, it doesn't make as much sense to do that as an infiltration when a group of people could come by and just launch a normal attack, and there's just not as much suspense when you can turn tail and run away easily, as opposed to like Shadow Moses or Metal Gear Solid 2 on the big shell, where you couldn't possibly escape if you messed up. Like, you had to hide. I mean, you might be able to run to a different part of the building, but basically you're going to have to face those enemies somehow. I don't know if an open world Metal Gear game is inherently impossible to do well, but it seems to me that it would be impossible to do it as well as the linear games that are Metal Gear Solid 1 through 4. So I get that there was criticism of the older games for being too linear, but honestly a lot of that came from Xbox 360 fanboys who didn't like Metal Gear Solid 4 back in 2008. And I really, really hope that they did not have any influence on how this game was made. But I feel like that might have been something that came down from Konami itself to make the game more mass market. It really just didn't work that well. And because of that, in my opinion, especially because of the plot, this is definitely the worst Metal Gear Solid game. at least in the main series. I'm not experienced with all the spin-off and handheld games, but it is definitely the worst of the numbered Metal Gear Solid games 1 through 5. Ultimately, it doesn't even contribute that much to the sort of mythos of Metal Gear Solid, the sort of, atmosphere in the world of Metal Gear Solid. It does address a very significant time period in the plot of Metal Gear Solid, but it doesn't really explain anything in a satisfying way. One of the subplot that's not finished had to do with the origin story of one of the characters who comes up later in the series. That would be a really good reason to do a prequel like this. However, they don't finish that subplot, and so it doesn't add anything. This adds very little. It basically helps explain one of the really old Metal Gear games that came before Metal Gear Solid. But is that really something anyone was looking for? I mean, I know it was kind of a forced continuation of a series that should have ended, but it really just was not needed, and it could have done things to expand the world. It could have done more to expand the Metal Gear Solid universe, but it just really didn't deliver, and that's the ultimate problem with the plot. Unlike the previous games, it didn't focus in on a major issue like human cloning, nuclear proliferation, or child soldiers, all of which it easily could have, especially child soldiers. It flirts with the idea of child soldiers, and even children being used to mine blood diamonds in Africa. Really interesting stuff that you would expect from a Metal Gear game, but then it doesn't really complete that plot either, or it doesn't really delve into it. The previous games got some criticism for having, half-hour-long cutscenes. But if you were a fan of the series, you clearly didn't mind that. And you would get to hear all kinds of really cool philosophical talk about the implications of all these different systems, and all the different problems plaguing the world. You don't get as much of that. The game is not entirely devoid of it. You just don't get as much. And that's really disappointing for a fan of a Metal Gear, of the Metal Gear series. And lastly, the game went an interesting route with the soundtrack, because unlike the other games, it doesn't have an original soundtrack. Or, it has a few original songs, but most of the songs are kind of throwback 80s classics, which is cool. I'm glad to have those in the game, but as someone who's a big fan of pretty much all the music from Metal Gear Solid 1 through 4, to the extent that I found a bunch of recreations of the songs on Spotify, to the extent that I go and listen to the Metal Gear Solid 2 theme on YouTube sometimes. And Father and Son is a beautiful song from Metal Gear Solid 4. But this game, the music just doesn't stack up like that. It's I get how it might work for some people, and honestly, this one might come down to personal taste, but as a musician myself, I always feel that music isn't talked about enough in games. And the Metal Gear Solid series has some of the best music out there, some of the best original music. Honestly, aside from the Quiet theme, the theme of the character called Quiet, who also, by the way, I wasn't really satisfied with where her subplot went, but her theme is incredible. I love her theme. But aside from that, I can't really think of one other song that stood out to me in this game. And certainly not an original one. And even most of the 80s throwback songs, your group is called the Diamond Dogs, which is a reference to an album, but, again, it is personal preference, but to me, the 80s songs just aren't my style of music, and if you don't like that style of music, if you don't like those throwback nostalgic songs, because you're like me and you were born in the 90s and you don't remember anything from the 80s, obviously, then you're probably not really going to enjoy this. If you remember the 80s, you'll probably like the music a lot more. But ultimately, I feel like it does not work as a Metal Gear Solid game. The gameplay does, but everything else doesn't really work. You just don't have that connection, you don't have that deep plot. Nothing else really comes through the way it should. So ultimately, a good game, but not a very good Metal Gear Solid game, and I'm very sorry to say that. But as a big fan of the Metal Gear Solid series, I felt like this was kind of an important video to make, and I hope it'll lead to some cool discussion in the comments. So please comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you all for watching.